The deep probe tackled how the world is at a very similar crossroads 60 years ago with Robert Kennedy Jr.'s foreign policy speech and how the proxy war currently happening in Ukraine could happen in Asia amid the rising tensions and America's provocation of China. Jade Calabroso files this report.
60 years have passed since the late U.S. President John F. Kennedy delivered a historic speech for peace that moved the hearts of millions of Americans and people around the world. But Kennedy's warning of an endless, senseless war still echoes up to this day amid rising nuclear tensions between superpowers and especially what America had become today. The late U.S. President's speech was echoed by his nephew, Democrat presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr.'s foreign policy speech, which was thoroughly discussed in the second episode of SMNI's The Deep Probe with Pastor Apollo C. Quiboloy and SMNI anchors Dr. Lorraine Badoy, Atty. Roque, and Jeffrey K. Eric Celiz. According to Kennedy Jr., the world is currently at a very similar crossroads to JFK's time. And just like 60 years ago, the people have a unique opportunity to diffuse such tensions by taking a different towards peace.
My uncle's commitment to peace bore fruit in the Limited Test Ban Treaty of August 1963. But his assassination that November turned the nation down another path. His successors have launched one war after another, along with the ceaseless expansion of our military.
Also, one of the centers of discussion is the so-called forever war or endless war with no clear conditions or results, and how the United States was shaped from a peaceful country, now an empire.
Every empire ends itself through the expansion of the military, overexpansion of its military abroad. And the founders knew that. John Quincy Adams spoke for all of them when he said, "America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy." Today, I want to recall that memory because this forever war, which has so drained our nation's vitality, now threatens to plunge the world into the unspeakable horror of nuclear Armageddon.
The so-called forever war and the ceaseless military expansion was also among the center of discussion, and how America poses itself as a peaceful nation despite waging war in various countries across the world.
So, ito yung espiritu ng Amerika ngayon na sinabi ni Robert Kennedy.
When you build empire by war,
yes,
it will come back to you and destroy your empire, even your own country.
So, kung ganon, palaging ganon ang sinabi ni Robert Kennedy dito, kung ganon tayo, sabi niya, that if we try that, to make ourselves an imperial nation abroad, that we would turn into a surveillance state.
Yun.
Puro suspicion, kahit mabuti ang ginagawa mo, pag nasuspekan ka, titirahin ka na. That we would turn into a surveillance state, a garrison state. Ngayon, ang Pilipinas, mayroong 17 na EDCA sites. Nagiging garrison tayo. A security state at home, o pati sa kanila. And that we would also destroy our economy, as happens with every empire.
RFK is referring to the current situation in Ukraine, saying that although he abhors Russia's invasion, the people must understand that the American government has also contributed to its circumstances through deliberate provocations of Russia going back to the 90s.
Ano ba yung concern ng Russia ngayon? Ito nga yung kasaysayan eh. Pinabayaan na niya na mapunta sa NATO ang Germany.
Yes.
Umalis siya ng Eastern Germany, bagamat inoccupy niya Eastern Germany dahil natatakot siya na yung mga Amerikano at kanyang mga alay ay pupwedeng lusubin siya at nasa tabi lang niyang teritoryo niyang Eastern Germany dahil nga doon sa pangako na hindi na sila pupunta doon sa Eastern Europe. Pero ngayon anong nangyari? Nag-expand ang NATO to 14 nations. Kasama na ngayon ng Sweden, kasama na ngayon ang Finland, na dati-rate ay neutral.
Today, we have surrounded Russia. We have moved it not 1 inch to the east, but 1,000 miles and 14 nations. We have surrounded Russia with missiles and military bases, something that we would never tolerate if the Russians did that to us.
If you put your shoes on Vladimir Putin's,
yes, of course.
Where are those missiles going?
Yeah.
And these are all NATO countries. where are all of those missiles pointing? Naturally to Russia. And if you put yourself in Vladimir Putin's shoes, what would you think?
Yeah.
It's a provocation. It's a thing that will trigger me to just, go ahead and protect my country first.
While, of course, we don't agree with what Putin has done, he's not the only madman here. No? So, kasi ang ginagawa kasi ng Amerika, they vilify the Russians, di ba?
Sila lang
They're the
masama.
only bad guys. They make it black and white, but that's not the truth. Ang layo sa katotohanan. It's America that's been doing all these machinations, no? And setting the theater for war.
According to the American University, as of 2021, the United States has around 750 base sites outside its own country, located in around 80 foreign countries and colonies. This number does not include the bases that will be built in the Philippines under the EDCA agreement. American University said that the sheer number of bases, secrecy, and lack of transparency of the base network make a complete list impossible. The deep probe also discussed America's pretext of their seemingly deceptive reasons for their involvement in wars.
And statements from our government officials and think tanks lay out the goals for the Ukraine war. Regime change in Russia, the overthrow of Vladimir Putin. This is what President Biden has said is our purpose in the Ukraine. The disabling and exhaustion of the Russian military and the dismembering of the Russian Federation. None of these objectives have anything to do with helping the Ukraine, which of course was the pretext for our involvement in the war. That's when our leaders told us that we were there for a humanitarian mission.
This is for humanitarian mission.
EDCA,
Yes.
Para daw sa atin yun.
Yes.
Kabutihan daw natin. Ang bait nila.
They said that to Ukraine also.
Bait na Amerika.
They were there for a humanitarian mission. That's when our leaders told us we were there for humanitarian mission. But they've since acknowledged that there is a broader geopolitical agenda and that Ukraine simply is a pawn in a proxy war between the United States and Russia.
According to RFK, warmongers inside U.S. leaderships pretend that a war is winnable, which is a dangerous lie, an illusion, which JFK's Defense Secretary Robert McNamara called as mass psychosis. Pastor Apollo meanwhile pointed out America's unipolar thinking and self-grandeur that was likely admitted by RFK in his speech when he questioned if U.S. President Joe Biden was willing to extend an olive branch to Russian President Vladimir Putin, just like what the previous American presidents had done in their time.
I'm reminded of that quote of Margaret Atwood. War is what happens when language fails. When we cannot anymore talk to each other.
America has broken off practically all diplomatic contact with Russia, so that communication has indeed become little more than an exchange of threats and insults. FDR met with Stalin. JFK met with Khrushchev. Nixon met with Brezhnev. Reagan met with Gorbachev. Can't Biden meet with Putin? The question now is, are we willing to do anything like that today? Or are we going to remain stuck in a self-righteous story in which America is categorically good and our opponents are irredeemably evil? If we remain stuck there, so will every other nation.
Naging unipolar world ang tingin ng Amerika sa kanilang sarili. That they are entitled, like gods, to own the whole world and to being a unipolar world, that kind of mentality, lahat sakop mo na, pinakikialaman mo na, parang ikaw ang tatay ng buong mundo. Huwag mong gawin yan, huwag mong gawin ito. O gawin mo yan, ito. Tulad sa atin ngayon, gusto tayo Marawi Seeds, bibili na tayo ng baril doon para gamitin. Hindi tayo binigyan. Bili tayo ng aeroplano, hindi pwede kasi ganun.
Ayaw nila kay Duterte.
Ayaw nila. So, ganun ang pagkakaalam ko na bakit ganito ang kanilang mentalidad. Sapagkat unipolar na ang kanilang thinking na sila lang ang may karapatan sa buong mundo, mamahala at mag-decide para kung kanino. Kahit ang Europe, tali-tali ng liig nila.
Even ang NATO, creation ng Amerika yan.
Yan,
The Deep Probe panelists pointed out the comparison between the proxy war in Ukraine and the tensions in the West Philippine Sea and the Taiwan issue.
Alam nyo, dito sa ating bansa, meron din proxy war. Ang pinalalabas nila, ang naglalabanan ay Pilipinas at China. Kasi ang mga Amerikano, hindi naman yan naniniwala doon sa titulo natin sa mga pinag-aagawang isla.
Exactly.
Palagi nilang sinasabi, hindi kami naghihimasok sa pinag-aagawang isla. Ang interest nila ay yung freedom of navigation. Pero, ang sinasabi nila, suwasaklolohan namin kayo Pilipinas kapag kayo atakihin. Dahil importante sa amin ang freedom of navigation. So ibig sabihin, dahil wala naman tayong kakayahan para tumayo at lumaban sa China, ang isa pang proxy war ay itong nangyayari sa ating sariling bansa. Na ang totoo niyan, ang Amerika ang makikipaglabang sa China dahil ayaw niya yung nakikita niya na baka maging mas mayaman at mas malakas pa sa kanya ang China.
Amid the escalating tensions that could trigger a nuclear Armageddon, RFK urged Americans to re-examine their attitude as America is struggling with its demoralized society and decaying economic infrastructure. He believes that the solution to de-escalating the conflict and ending the vicious war cycle is genuine peace that comes from within and will start from a changed attitude.
Peace comes from a different place. It starts by seeing within others and within ourselves that which is not selfish, but is brave and generous and idealistic and has good intentions. I therefore call on our present leadership to adopt President Kennedy's maxims and to start de-escalating right now. I call on them to fulfill John F. Kennedy's declaration. I call on the military establishment to exercise disciplined self-restraint. I call upon the State Department to avoid unnecessary irritants and hostile rhetoric. And here's the most important thing of all. I call on every American to join in a new peace movement, to make your voices heard, to reject the insanity of escalation, and to celebrate no longer the wartime president, but a president who keeps the peace.
Reporting for SMNI News, this has been Jade Calabroso.